All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dan Orkin. I'm one of the co-founders here at Envision Blockchain. Today I'm with Jaylene Molina. She's our ESG consultant, and we're going to be providing you a webinar on the methodology breakdown series. This is a 6-part series. This is, I think, Jaylene, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is our 3rd one in or 4th one in.
It's the 4th, yeah.
This is the 4th one in, so we have a couple more after this. And today we're going to be providing a methodology breakdown of the UNFCCC CDM AR-ACM0003. Just a little bit about Envision Blockchain. I see that there's a lot of new faces in here. We opened up in the early part of 2018 with a very specific focus within the Web3 space. So Envision Blockchain, we help organizations through their whole application process, which we consider 3 major milestones on their Web3 journey. You're going to find yourself at the very beginning, understanding what your use case is through different use case analysis. You're also going to want to develop a proof of concept before you start to significantly ramp up the investments into your application. And we also help out, once all that is figured out, scale deployment. And about 2.5 years ago, we began working with the hedera team to build the vision of the Guardian, and we are the builders and maintainers of the open source Guardian. Just a quick overview about what the Guardian is. So the Guardian really came to be because the process of designing and collecting and supporting the data that relates to carbon claims is extremely manual. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And because of that, project developers are really prone to errors. And a lot of that could be through data quality issues. There's really a lack of assurance. There is a need for technology improvements in the space. We all hear the news about potential double counting and greenwashing, which leads to an overall lack of trust on what the benefits of creating carbon offsets and renewable energy credits can be. And that's where the Guardian really comes into play, because at the core of the Guardian, as you can see on the screenshot on the right-hand side, we have something at the core called the policy workflow engine. And policy workflow engine, it mimics a BPM tool, essentially, a business process management tool. And that is a very flexible way that we can create policy workflows, which is used to really either create your own standards, or it can mirror the standards of business requirements of regulatory bodies and standard bodies. That when you put everything together and you stack these blocks that you see on the right-hand side, we now have what's called a digital methodology, or a DMRV. And you can think of these blocks that you see on the right-hand side, where some of them are purple and some of them are yellow and some of them are blue, and there's lines going around. These are essentially, think of them like blocks like Legos, where you can stack them together to create your desired workflow. So what Jaylene is going to go into a little bit is on the methodology breakdown, where you can go on to these standard body websites and you can download these documentations that are like 305 pages long. Some of them are 200, some of them are even upwards of 400 pages long. Now we have a digital version of that really fixes every action that needs to happen. And I think that it's really important to mention that this is really the first of its kind, to our knowledge at least, to really combine all the latest and greatest technologies that we have that really makes this whole ecosystem revolutionary, where we included decentralized identifiers, which are these new type of global identifiers that you can place them to any person, place, or thing. So an entity, an organization, or an IoT device can be equipped with its own identifier. Each identifier then, as certain actions happen, like you're submitting environmental data, whether it's MRV data or just contextual information around the project, you create these digital documents, which are verifiable credentials. Essentially, once you go through the process and you create your digital offset, all of these digital documents, or the verifiable credentials, they all get linked to each other and they form what's called as a verifiable presentation. And when you take this presentation, that this video keeps looping on the right-hand side, and the mouse right now is going over these little cards, these are essentially these VCs, or the verifiable credentials, that are presented in this verifiable presentation, where you can see all the information that led up to that token mint event. And because we're using the Hedera public ledger, everything is fully discoverable. And this is what we mean when we call the trust chain. So the trust chain is really the finished product of all these offsets, that it provides this way that you're able to see what's happening, who did it, when they did it, how they did it, and everything is all digitally signed. And I believe this is my last slide, but just to talk about this here is that there's two versions available of the Guardian. So you can immediately fork and use the open source version of the Guardian, github.com/hashgraph/Guardian. Feel free to use that and let us know how you feel about it. We also have, which is live in a free beta period, the Managed Guardian service. And the Managed Guardian service, it was just launched in December of 2022. And this is our hosted environment that we provide customers with all the resources and tools and support to get started, because not every organization wants to deal with the intricacies of Web3 and of all these different components and the Hedera SDKs and IPFS and all the different scalability options that need to be provided to make things production ready. But that's what the Managed Guardian service is all about. You can still get the user interface, you still have access to the APIs in order to white label it and to build your application on top of it, but you get the SaaS benefits such as multi-tenancy and cloud infrastructure that's supported with fairly large uptime SLAs. And along that, you also get the scalable infrastructure that we understand that's needed for heavy MRV data streaming. So if you're interested in any of the two, please feel free to reach out. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass this on to Jaylene. Thank you, Jaylene.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this month's webinar. My name is Jaylene, and I'm an ESG consultant for Envision Blockchain. And today our webinar will focus on CDM's methodology, AR-ACM0003, which is a methodology for afforestation and reforestation of lands except wetlands. Before we proceed, we will have a quick recap of the topics we covered in our previous webinars. Next, we'll provide you with a policy creation checklist, which will guide you in establishing effective procedures to follow when creating policies for the Guardian. After that, we'll dive into the introduction and analysis of the ACM0003 methodology itself. We'll explore its key aspects, benefits, and other important information to keep in mind. To enhance your understanding of the methodology, we have prepared a live demonstration of the Managed Guardian service and the policy differentiation tool. This tool provides you with practical insights into the ways that we can point out differences in methodologies. So for this demo, we'll compare the CDM afforestation methodology to Verra's afforestation methodology. Thank you for joining us today, and let's get started with this exciting session. So let's take a moment to recap the insightful webinars we've conducted in the past. These webinars have provided valuable knowledge and insights on various methodologies and tools related to sustainable land management, agriculture, afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation. So first, we had a webinar on Verra's methodology for the adoption of sustainable agricultural land management. The next webinar focused on Verra's methodology for improved agricultural land management. And we also conducted a webinar that compared those two methodologies. In that webinar, we spoke about their similarities, differences, and respective applications. And lastly, we explored the Verra methodology for afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation, and we compared it with the gold standard afforestation and reforestation methodology. We identified differences not only at the schema level, but also in their workflows. And we encourage you to revisit these webinars to deepen your understanding of these methodologies and tools. And now we could move forward with our policy development checklist. So in this slide, we'll discuss the essential steps that you can take to create a policy for the Guardian. Creating a well-defined policy is crucial for effectively implementing the Guardian tool in your project. So let's go through the steps together. We have step one, which is identify the standard and appropriate methodology. So you'll begin by identifying the relevant standard and methodology that aligns with your project's goals and requirements. This will serve as the foundation for developing your policy. Step 2 is to review the standard and methodology documents. So thoroughly review the documentation provided by the standard and the methodology, and ensure a comprehensive understanding of their guidelines, the criteria, and principles. Step 3 is to identify roles, processes, and requirements. So you want to identify the various roles involved in the implementation of the Guardian tool and define their responsibilities. You could determine the necessary processes and requirements outlined by the standard for a successful policy implementation. Step 4 is to identify input parameters and equations. So understand the specific input parameters and equations used in the methodology. These will be essential for accurately calculating and reporting the correct values. And step 5 is to create a workflow and schema. So you want to develop a clear workflow and schema that outlines the step-by-step process for using the Guardian tool within your project. This will help streamline operations and ensure consistent application. And lastly is step 6, which is to build a policy for the Guardian. So doing a quick overview of this methodology, I've listed out some key points to consider. The ACM3 methodology allows for the establishment of afforestation and reforestation projects on land that's not classified as wetland. This provides opportunities to enhance carbon sequestration and biodiversity on various types of land. There's a set limit on soil disturbance, so specifically capping it at 10% if the baseline land use has a higher soil organic carbon content than the proposed forestry land use. This restriction ensures the preservation and conservation of the soil carbon stocks during the project implementation. And this methodology is designed to be flexible and applicable to various soil types and land use practices. It takes into account the diverse conditions and characteristics of different regions, allowing for widespread adoption and implementation. So the ACM3 methodology allows for flexibility regarding the inclusion or exclusion of certain carbon pools. The following carbon pools are optional. We have dead wood, which is the carbon stored in dead wood, such as fallen trees or branches. Litter, the organic matter such as leaves or plant debris that accumulates on the forest floor. Soil organic carbon, the carbon stored in the soil, which contributes to the soil fertility and health. And in contrast, the methodology mandates the inclusion of 2 carbon pools. We have the above ground biomass, the carbon stored in the living vegetation above the ground, including trees, shrubs, and other plants. And then we have the below ground biomass, which is the carbon stored in the roots and other below ground components of the vegetation. It's important to note, though, that one of the GHG sources explicitly addressed in this methodology is the burning of woody biomass. And this source of greenhouse gas emissions is taken into account to assess the net carbon impact of the project. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the ACM3 methodology considers carbon pools and GHG sources to assess the net carbon impact of the project. So to calculate this impact, we utilize an equation directly derived from this methodology, and we can break down this equation. So we're looking for the net GHG reductions and removals. To determine this parameter, we subtract the actual or the project net GHG removals by sinks from the baseline net GHG removals. Then another parameter you'll see is leakage. And in addition to the net GHG reductions and removals, we also account for this leakage. So leakage refers to any unintended release or increase in GHG emissions outside of the project boundary. We subtract this leakage from the calculated net GHG reductions and removals. And by following this equation, we can accurately evaluate the overall net impact of the project. Now, let's discuss the 2 types of certified emission reductions. We have a TCER and LCER as part of the credits for CDM, and we'll talk about their characteristics and usage. The temporary certified emission reduction that we'll call the TCERs are based on the carbon stored in standing forest at a specific verification date. They represent the amount of carbon sequestered in these forests, and buyers can utilize these verified TCERs as carbon offsets for a period of 5 years. During this time, the TCERs serve as a valid offset for carbon emissions. However, it's important to note that once the 5-year period expires, the TCERs are no longer considered valid offsets. Then we have long-term certified emission reductions that we'll call the LCERs, and LCERs, on the other hand, represent the change in carbon stock between 2 verification periods. They provide a measure of the variation in carbon sequestration over time, and the accumulated LCERs can be utilized as acceptable offsets for CO2 emissions from the verification period until the project concludes. However, if there is a reduction in biomass, such as through harvesting, the accumulated LCERs will be reduced accordingly, reflecting the decrease in CO2 sequestration caused by the biomass reduction event. And as we move into the schemas and workflows, we're going to take a look at our Excel spreadsheet. And just to note, we use Excel because it's an easier way for us to organize this information before it's transferred to the Guardian. So if you look at the very top, that we separate it by the required fields, you can put yes or no. The schema type is a string, a name, address, phone number. The question that we're answering, so in this case, it's mainly our parameters. Do we want to allow multiple answers for that specific parameter, and the way we're answering it, or the data that has to fall within that parameter? Then you'll see these gray rows, and that would be our different schemas. So we start off with our project details. You'll see information about the person organizing or entity organizing this project, the methodologies they're using, any other methodologies that are referenced within this, descriptions about the area, crediting period, carbon pools, GHG sources, and what monitoring plan are you using. Then we have a schema for default values. This all just makes it easier for us to do the auto calculates that you're going to see in green. So as we scroll down, then we have our baseline scenario. We have the carbon stocks that we mentioned are mandatory under this methodology. We also have carbon stocks in shrubs. And then we're moving into the carbon stock of dead wood and litter that we spoke about being optional. So all these white fields are going to be used to calculate our auto calculates here, and also using the default values. Then we move into the project scenarios. And now we're moving into our emissions. So it's going to be burning of biomass, and it's calculated in separate ways. So we have from site preparation, fire to clear land of harvest residue, forest fires, and then we get to our leakage. And finally, the net anthropogenic GHG removals by sinks. And now we could take a look at our workflow. We're going to see this within our demo. These are all the steps we're going to take and the roles that are going to be a part of that step. So we see these small squares at the bottom left, and we have blue, orange, green, and a gold. So blue is going to be our project proponent, orange is UNFCCC, green is the VB, and gold is going to be the designated national authority. So starting from the top, we have the project proponent prepares and documents the project description and submits to CDM. Then the designated national authority approves the project description, and UNFCCC adds the project to the project pipeline. Then the designated operational entity that we're going to call the VVB in this case assesses and validates project description, provides a validation report, and UNFCCC adds the project to the project registry. Then the project proponent conducts monitoring and sends monitoring to the VVB. And the VVB assesses and validates the monitoring report and certifies the project. And finally, we have UNFCCC reviewing this documentation and issuing the CERs. So before we move into our demo, I want to go over our policy differentiation tool. So this tool allows users to easily compare policies issued by different or the same standard registries. And this differentiation feature evaluates policies based on their blocks, transitions between blocks, roles and actors, and more. And the policy differentiation tool displays a numerical compatibility score and a list of differences. So this tool is currently in its MVP phase, meaning that it's in its early development, and we plan to add more features to future updates. So if there's any specific features you'd like to see added to this tool, make sure to drop it in the comments or reach out to us. We appreciate the community's feedback. Throughout 2023, we'll work closely with the community to further develop these features. And we're also building a versatile tagging system within the Guardian that will enable users to create and manage informative tags for various assets and artifacts like policies in the Guardian ecosystem. Combining the policy diff tool with tagging allows for independent commentary and review of each methodology. And these tags can be added by any actor with a valid decentralized ID, making it a powerful tool similar to Yelp or Amazon reviews for the carbon market industry. So now we could move into this demo on the Managed Guardian service. When we get on to Managed Guardian service, we can click on policies up here and see that we have different tabs like schemas, artifacts, modules, policies, and we could take a look at schemas. So by clicking here in the policy, we can choose which one we want to take a look at. And we're seeing all the schemas that were mentioned in that Excel spreadsheet. We go back to the policies tab and we click on this edit button. You're also going to see this technical workflow that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. It's similar to Lego blocks where you could put them all together to build the policy. And we're seeing some here for mint token, our trust chain. We're going to go back to policies and start the dry run. All right, so as mentioned in that workflow, we have different roles here. So we're going to create the users for those roles. I'm going to add 3 users. We're already logged in as the standard registry. It's going to show up as administrator. So by clicking on user 1, we can assign a role. So we're going to select the project proponent as user 1. Then we can go to user 2 and assign the VB. And you're going to give your VVB a name. Now we see it says waiting for approval. This is when we would go and approve this, but we're going to continue assigning roles. So the last one's going to be the designated national authority. So let's go back to the standard registry, and this is when we're going to approve the BVB. By selecting on View Document, you could see the information that was entered by the BVB, which would be their name. And the standard registry can either approve or reject. We're going to select Approve. And now we can go to our project proponent and create this project. So for this demo, we're just going to be using demo values. And we're seeing all the information that was under the project details in the schemas. You're going to select a map. And now we're getting into information about the specific project. We have our monitoring period. We're just going to do a year from now for this demo. And then continue filling out the form. So the carbon pool, GHG sources, monitoring plan. And now we're getting into all those default values. And again, we're just using information here that's not related to any specific project. It's just for this demo. Now that everything's been filled out, you're going to see the OK button turn blue. You can select that. And now we're going to move into the next step in this workflow, which was going to the designated national authority, and they're going to validate this. So they could also see all the information that was just input. Once they've reviewed it, they can either click validate or reject. We're going to select validate. And then we're going to continue through our workflow. So we're going to go to our standard registry. And the standard registry has these tabs up here. So you're going to have the approved BVB, the project pipeline, monitoring reports, token history, and trust chain. And we're going to move through these as we go through this demo. So let's select the project pipeline. And now the standard registry also has access to this BC file where they can see all of the project information. And then they're going to select add and add it to the project pipeline. Now we're going to go to the BVB. Before we do that, we need to assign the BVB. So we're back in the project proponent, and we're going to select here under assign and assign the BVB. Now they have access to that document. Now the BVB has different tabs, so documents, projects, and monitoring reports. We're going to go into the projects tab. And the BVB also can review the BC file with all the information about the project. And we're going to select validate. Now we're going to go back to the standard registry where they're going to add this to their registry. And the project proponent now has to conduct a monitoring report. So we're going to select add report. This is where you would update any data that needs to be updated, whether it's every year, every 5 years. And you're going to update your map all the way at the end. And select OK. Now the VBB has to review this monitoring report. They're going to find it within the monitoring report tab. They can view the document, see all the information that was updated. The new map is going to appear at right there. And all these fields would be updated appropriately. Then they can select verify. And the final step here would be going to the standard registry, selecting monitoring report, and now they have submit button. So we're going to select that. We see our status go from minting to minted, and we can select the token history tab now. And we're seeing that for this project with the demo values that we input, we got 4 tokens here. We can select view trust chain, and we're seeing that VP, the verified presentation with all the VC files in it. You can see the token that was issued, who received that token, what amount, and the mint date. You also see their verified signature, what policy it is, and at the very bottom, this is the most important part of all of this, is you can see every step that was taken from the very beginning of the account being created by the administrator, the policy was created, the automatic completion of project fields. This is all the green fields that we saw within the schemas. You can see them reflect here once they've been auto-calculated. So we see all the ones that I input. And then we're seeing these fields. These weren't there before. That's everything that's been auto-calculated using the equations from the methodology. And we keep going down and we see who took what step. It's all organized in these VC files and this verified presentation, all the way till the very end where we mint these VCUs.
Thank you, Jaylene. Really appreciate the presentation, and thank you for all the audience for showing up today. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us on GitHub, on Discord, or directly to Envision Blockchain, just as Jaylene had mentioned a little earlier. And we hope to see you again next month. Thanks and have a great day.